right, this is the Committee on Legislative Affairs. This is Thursday, October 6, 2016. We're at 6 p.m. I have Councilor Mangan,
Here.
and I have Councilor DePiero.
Present.
We have 2 members present. We do not have a quorum.
Okay, Mr. Clerk, then we advise that by according to our rules, we have to delay the meeting for at least 15 minutes. Okay, so this meeting will be in recession for 15 minutes, up to 15 minutes, or when another member joins us. Thank you.
right, we're reconvening the Legislative Affairs Committee. This is a Thursday, October 6, 2016. We also have Councilor Napolitano is present, so we do have a quorum.
Thank you. Will the councilman please stand and pledge allegiance to the flag?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right.
Clerk, read the first item.
All right, the only item, this is ordinance sought by Council Frank Capone. This is to amend Section 13A-62. Loud and unnecessary noises is hereby amended in subsection B, paragraph 6.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to invite Council Capone up to speak. He was involved in this, some of the changes, so if he could, please come forward.
Please come before us.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, gentlemen. Fred Capone, Council Ward 1, 383 Broadway, Everett. The piece here, just a quick background. I know you guys know the history here, but for the benefit of the viewing audience as well, there was a piece that was sent from the administration dealing with overnight work. It was naming the police chief as the sole designee. Body felt that we should be involved with the process, so it was changed to the council. It went back, it got vetoed, and we sustained the veto. So it looked like there was some common middle ground that we needed to find. We needed to find, because I think we all realize that if there's an emergency or something that's a short project, you want to get through it without as much red tape as possible. And the mayor and his communication with the veto was accurate. The things that come through the council by its very nature, it's going to be a little bit more involved. So you have to have an avenue where it's streamlined and you can get things done quickly. And by the same token, if you have a project that's going to go on for any appreciable amount of time, we really shouldn't divest ourselves from it, because it's going to impact the neighborhoods and we're going to need to be involved in that process. We really shouldn't step out. So what I did is I took a look at it, and it's set up in 3 subparts. The first one deals with emergency scenarios, and if it's an event of an emergency, it's the police chief or their designee. So if something happens in the middle of the night, or there's something that's going on that jeopardizes public safety, you don't have to worry about convening the council. It's a quick call, get to the chief or the designee, and you can jump on it right away. The next 2 are non-emergency scenarios. The first one is listed as number 2. If the work to be done isn't going to exceed 3 consecutive nights, you can still go with the police chief and go that route, get it done. If it's going to be, and then the last one, if it's going to be a larger project where it's going to exceed 3 consecutive nights, or if it's going to be a project where, because you can kind of get around the city council involvement if you do it in spurts. If we just left it as 3 consecutive nights, you could just go and do 3 and stop, take a day off, go do 3 more, and you could do that a million times in the course of the year. So what I've got it set up for in that third one was if it's exceeding 3 consecutive evenings, or if for the same project or for the same site, you've got a developer who's asking on more than 4 separate occasions for overnight work. At that point, that demonstrates a pattern that's impacting the neighborhood, and that's where we really should be involved. So that's what I threw together. I don't know what the committee thinks, if they think that 3 consecutive nights is enough, if it should be 2 consecutive nights. I figured most projects can get done in 3 days, I would think. So if it's anything more than that, then we really should be involved. But I leave it to the committee members if you think that 3 is sufficient, or if it should be a smaller number before the council gets involved. That's why I kind of picked 3, but.
Councilman DePiero.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, first of all, for writing the ordinance, because I know that we had some confusion without actually having one on the books, and I had some reservations about overruling the veto and being stuck with a certain ordinance, and with the possibility of it being changed down the line. I'm happy that we have something new and fresh here, and it seems to meet in the middle. I have no issues with it. I think it's going to work well, and I'll be supporting it.
Great, thank you.
Councilman Mangan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, thank you, Council Capone, for doing this. Like I said, I think this is great, the way it's set up. I think it really goes to what we want here. and I hope it, when it comes back out onto the floor, it passes unanimously. I just have a couple of questions.
Sure.
One was, in the event of emergency, so when you say, just so the public knows, when it impacts public safety, can you, like, do you have an example or something that you possibly thought of, just so, I mean, so for instance, let's say a cement truck pulls up and it's running late, it gets a flat tire and it gets to the site real late, whatever and stuff, and it still wants to, pour
Right.
cement, I mean,
Yeah, and that's why I tailored it to say that impacts public safety. Because if you just said emergency, an emergency, it's got to be an emergency to the general public. Because an emergency to the developer, well, I really want this. So as long as it's going to be a short-term project, he or she could still go to the police chief.
Okay.
It's just that, what constitutes an emergency, and we've got the definitions in the statute, but I wanted to make sure that it spoke to public safety. Anything that affected the public, that affected the community. Because contractors say, well, if I don't get this thing poured, my emergency is going to cost me $2,000 more tomorrow. That's really not an emergency. But if they needed to do an overnight job, they could contact the police chief or the designee, and they can still do it. As long as it's not going to go beyond 3 consecutive nights, they're all set.
thank you. Now, just, I don't know if it's in our ordinance somewhere, but, what it says here, it talks about 7 AM and not, going after 7 AM and so forth, but let's just say that, next door to you, somebody wants to do, decides they want to do carpentry work and get the saw and whatever out and start whatever. How is this different from, maybe somebody doing construction right next to you, putting in windows or doing work in their basement or something like that?
Yeah, right now, you can't do anything between 9 PM and 7 AM. And if someone was looking to do something, they need to have written authorization to do it. So if you had a neighbor who started banging on his walls going, oh yeah, they just passed that ordinance, you call the police department, they go down. If the individual does not have written authorization from the police chief or something from the council, if it's going to be longer duration, they have to cease and desist at that point in time, so.
Okay, just, because I just want to make sure, and I knew that, but I just wanted the general public to hear that, but I thank you for bringing that forward. I think this is great, Mr. Chairman. Like I said, I have no other questions unless you might have some yourself.
I actually have 1 or 2 questions from the
Sure.
chair. All right, I think the exceeding 3 consecutive is fine. It plays into where the chief can do it within 3 days, and then if it's going to exceed that, that's fine. One thing I'm trying to look at here is that, how do we gauge or monitor whether there's 4 consecutive separate requests? Because if they're going before the chief on those, we wouldn't have any awareness of that unless we receive complaints.
Right. What ended up happening in that case is the chief would have to be notified of the ordinance, and then once the chief or the designee has been requested more than 4 times in 1 year to do overnight work, at that point, the chief would have to say, you need to go in front of the council.
Okay. All right, so the chief would be monitoring that and then
Right.
informing us if there's
Correct.
an issue. All right, that's fine. That's all I had.
And I just, so the committee knows, I did send a copy of it over to the city solicitor, have her take a look at it, make sure there weren't going to be any issues or problems, and she said everything looked good, so.
Any further questions?
No, excuse with a customary thanks.
Thank you very
And,
much.
I'd like to make a favorable recommendation out to the next city council meeting, Mr. Chairman.
Second?
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. Take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.
Thank you.